Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
Our goals are the same as every year, and I think, like I said, I'm more excited than ever that we can really compete at the highest levels here. Of course, winning the division is first and foremost our goal, and from there, that's where you get into the dance, and anything can happen, and that's where we want to be. So, like I said, this is you can label it a million different ways, but we have a lot of great players on our roster. And I think when we went through the process with hiring a GM, hiring a head coach, I think we were an attractive team for that reason.
Purple Access is the show on Thursdays. Judd Zolgad, Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, and my former partner on the Viking beat, and of course, executive producer Declan Goff. Purple Access presented by our friends at Surly Brewing. Oh, more on that as the show progresses, and also by TCL TV. Enjoy more with TCL, meaning that if you're not watching sports on a TCL, you might not be doing it right. That, of course, was Mark Wilf, who owns the Vikings, off the top. And Chip, I want to throw it to you with that comment. What are your feelings when you hear Mark talk about, the fact that we got great players, we can compete? What do you think of what he clearly believes to be the truth?
I think he absolutely believes everything he says. I think that ownership believes, and I've said this from the beginning, that it was a Mike Zimmer problem. 100% a Mike Zimmer problem, because everything they've done from that day about being super competitive, and I think he was at the end of that clip, he said, well, you can label it however you want. I think he's heard that he's said super competitive a lot. Probably somebody's gotten that to him, but they looked at, to me, it's clear they looked at all those close games last year and said, this is a Mike Zimmer problem. This team is a lot better than what he's squeezing out of it. Either he's going to be right this year or next year, or this thing is going to completely blow up on their faces and they're going to have to go through the rebuild that a lot of people wanted them to go through.
So I agree with what you're saying completely. Here's my issue. And I share this with Phil and Dex on Purple Daily on Thursday as well, but I'll run this by you as well. There is no question that the last 2 years, and 2021 probably especially, Mike Zimmer and his coaching staff didn't have good years. Like I'm not going to debate here that they fired the wrong guy. I was an advocate, in fact, of firing Spielman and Mike, and they fired them both. So I'm not going to backtrack on that now. But I guess here's what I didn't expect, and here's how I feel it's trended, and it's what bothers me. And quite frankly, I feel that we saw this in the cycle of the Wild for a while, firing coaches and bringing in new coaches to coach the same guys. I feel like, Chip, there's a lack of responsibility here. I feel like they're putting it all on Mike. And it's like, if we got great players. We got players that are fantastic. And that doesn't mean that you don't have some. You do. Justin Jefferson, Danielle Hunter, when healthy, Dalvin Cook, when healthy, are very, very good players. But that being said, I think denying your culpability in a problem in sports is easy and problematic. And to piggyback off that, I am not saying, I don't know the Vikings players as people, okay? But what I am saying is there is some of that, in my opinion, same comfort of the inmates trying to run the asylum. Thielen, Kendricks, again, they might be the greatest people on the face of the earth. And this is not to say that Suter and Parisi were bad human beings, but it became too easy for them to sort of slough off and say, I'm comfortable here and I think we can win. This feels like that same thing again. And the last thought is, I really think it's unfair to O'Connell because he's being given this team now and being told, you got to win right now. And I'm saying, hold on a second here. Mike wasn't great, but first of all, you hired Mike and kept him around for a long time. And second of all, I think O'Connell needs some runway here, and you're giving him none.
His boss, the owner, just went to the owners' meetings and basically said, this should be a playoff team, and then we'll see what happens after that. But he thinks they can compete at the highest level. So what happens if they don't?
Right.
Is the coach going to take the responsibility for that? Because they basically said, hey, you got great players. You should be a playoff team. So that puts a ton of pressure on Kevin O'Connell to be a playoff team this year and to satisfy what this ownership believes is a roster that's, again, I think I said this a couple weeks ago. I think the owners are infatuated by the top 6 players on this 53 and maybe not fully given enough attention to the entire 53 and the holes that they have. And this is the danger in what they're doing with the roster is what was it that Belichick always does? Get rid of guys a year too soon and a year too late. And you're hoping that this veteran core that you have has not reached their peak.
Correct.
Because the other thing is they're pushing some of this money into the future where you're going to have to pay, there's going to be dead money in the future by their attempts to win right now and stay relevant. Yep. And so I don't know why. I guess I do know why, but they're just not willing to turn over this roster yet. Maybe it was the close games last year, Judd. Maybe they just saw those close games and feel like they're right there. But there's dangers in that. Two things. One is your inability to win those tells you you're not good enough.
Correct.
It's not a fluky thing, right?
Correct. At some point, it's not. That's correct.
But the other thing, I keep going back to what Brad Childress always said, that each year stands on its own merit. Yep. Just because you felt like you were close last year doesn't mean the same set of circumstances is going to happen again the next year. And if you run it back, you're going to get a better result because you have a better coach now. And so there's danger in that too. But this to me, so much of that, it's so interesting because so much of what they did felt like they were turning a big page in this organization, something the Wilfs don't do. They trust continuity and all this. And then for them to bring a new coach, a new GM, and it just felt like a clean slate and start over and rebuild the roster. But then they come back with, let's run it back with the roster, and this is going to be a playoff team and even more because for whatever reason, they just do not want to embark on that other path yet. I think eventually they're going to have to, right?
Yes.
But they just don't want to go down it yet. And it puts a lot of pressure on this new regime.
And if you had a collection of Jeffersons, like his age, ability around there, I'd say, yeah, you know what? Coach lost him. Move on. Mm-hmm. But you don't. You got an aging out roster. And look, any one player I'm not going to blame. So bringing Patrick Peterson back is fine. Like he was a pro's pro.
You had to.
He's way past his prime, but he's good. He's not terrible yet. But when it's the collection of that, and in retrospect too, I'd like to talk about the day that Mike and Rick got fired, what Kendrick said, which was he referenced a fear-based culture, which is a problem. And I totally agree. And I get what he's saying. But in some ways, it's like Wilfs looked at that and said, oh, that was the problem.
100% they did, Judd.
The other problem, though, with that is, and I will go back to it because we've seen it before in this town, is bringing everybody back now allows, because the Vikings are bending over backwards to be kind to everybody now. I mean, Kwesi's basically going out and picking up reporters to drive him to his press conferences. And, what this does is this allows the players, in my opinion, day one of training camp to have a leg up on the coach. The coach is new. The coach is going to be nice. The coach is going to try to be amenable to what the players want. And that's great to a certain degree, but there need to be lines. Mike Zimmer had probably gone too far. I get that. But you also can't have Mike Yo again because this group will push him around. I don't think the Wilfs understand what they're doing here. I think they're doing things as fans. And that to me is creating a real problem because you can sort of see the trains on the tracks headed towards each other and no one's coming close to trying to stop it.
Yeah. And I think I don't worry about so much them having 53 coaches, right? I think players still will understand, hey, my coach is my boss, and this is a league where I could get cut. Now, will there be guys that test that theory? Probably. I mean, did we see that some with Leslie Frazier?
Right.
Maybe. I can't think of a case right off the top of my head, but I'm sure there was, right? Hey, he's a nice guy and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, we did.
But I think what they're doing is getting their core guys, Kendricks and Thielen and Dalvin and Daniil, and almost having them not self-police, but kind of set the agenda for the locker room, which I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think I don't worry about how players are going to react to this new regime. I just wonder, Judd, are they good enough? Have they fixed the problems in the roster enough to where you think, yes, they're a fringe playoff team right now. I think you would say that, right? Because we saw it last year, and they're good enough to be relevant just with their individual talent. But don't you have to look? Wasn't this the time to look 5 years down the road, 7 years down the road versus 11 months? I mean,
that's what we thought.
Are you good enough with this quarterback and this talent and all that? Because really, what's the one thing the only thing that should be your agenda right now? Trying to build a Super Bowl team, right?
Correct.
And so how do you get there? I mean, I just don't think you can sit there and look at this and say, well, let's just get in the playoffs and anything can happen. Well, I don't know. Really? I mean,
well, that's what Mark Wilf said.
I say it in NHL, but
yeah. Well, Mark Wilf, though, the problem is the Wilfs will always, and they'll always default to this. They watched the Giants. They watched Coughlin's Giants, and they loved the Giants. And they saw, the Giants, it was good luck. But I mean, and that happens every once in a while. But it takes everything going right. And it's not like those Giants teams were built to be juggernauts, which is what you ideally want to try and build as much as possible for a run, right? So yeah, I'm with you. The other thing that bothers me though is I feel like the blaming Mike thing has become the culture, whether they like it or not, that is now established with the Vikings is finger pointing.
Yeah.
If something goes wrong, blame somebody else.
Yeah. And isn't it interesting though, Judd, that the moves that they made this offseason are pretty identical to what they've done the last couple of years with Spielman and Zimmer in terms of finding bargain veterans and plugging holes and hoping crossing your fingers and hoping they work out. Whether it's, I think bringing Pat Peterson back, you had to, and he played well enough, but
it's fine.
The offensive line additions, now Darius Smith is not a veteran just plugging in there. He was a big time signing, I think, but
his back is bad.
But some of the other, the offensive line stuff is just like, it's veteran guys who you don't even know if they're starters, so it's, it feels sort of like, run it back the way Zim and them did, it's interesting.
I am absolutely shocked. I think the one thing that surprises me the most of everything is this one, right guard, because
I wanted to bring that up.
O'Connell is here to help get Kirk on a supposedly Super Bowl track. And one of the biggest things, and it doesn't take, lots of going back and watching film to see that interior pressure bugs Kirk. And by the way, in Kirk's defense, bugs a lot of quarterbacks. Yeah. And you've got what now? Oli Udoh coming back, Wyatt Davis, who has not played a snap, and Jesse Davis, correct? The guy that they signed from the Dolphins. That's what you got.
What in the world is going on with Wyatt Davis? I mean,
I have no idea.
I mean, I would love to know, like, do they think he's not any good? Not going to be? I mean, what is going on there? I mean, he didn't get a sniff last year, and now you're signing the guy from the Dolphins who I don't think had the greatest analytics in the world coming from there. And
his right tackle deep dive statistics were awful.
And I'm sure they're bringing him for the guard, so maybe he was playing out of position there. I don't know, but it doesn't speak highly of Wyatt Davis and their evaluation on, I guess, college film or game or practice film, whatever they're looking at to even evaluate him. that one's just mind-boggling to me, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then, oh, by the way, Bradbury.
Right, which I'm also not comfortable with. And I don't see how you fix him. He is who I mean, at some point in time, that to me, that's not a schematic thing.
Judd,
He's getting forklifted.
And the thing is, let's be honest, at this point in your career, you're sort of who you are, right?
Right.
You don't just radically become a totally different player. Was this his fourth year? You may improve a little, but you know, I don't know that he's going to be able to fix his deficiencies and getting overpowered.
So explain that to me, though.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't think a scheme change is going to fix it. I mean, that's a physical thing, right? Not more than a mental or whatever. So I don't know, John.
I think in the case of Bradbury, it's twofold. One, physical for sure.
Yeah.
Two, I don't think, and again, you're not going to change this. I don't think he's nasty enough. And because when you see guys his size who play his spot, they are some of the meanest people you'll ever come across. Jeff Christie was great, but you know what he was? He was nasty. Yeah. Bradbury's not nasty, and that's no personal indictment against him. But you need, if you're going to be his size and good, you need to have a mean streak that is very serious. And I don't think he has that. And you know what? He might be great in business after football. It might serve him well. But yeah, I thought part of the reason why some veterans with salary would be gone would be so they could at least address center or guard with a really good replacement. And right now, to what you're saying, 1,000% right. They're basically going with it's fine. We'll find a guy.
Yeah, like any move you make now, you're in the second or third wave of free agency.
Well, the guards are all gone.
So you're not like dramatically upgrading it. You're getting a veteran with some experience and crossing your fingers and hoping you get some magic there. So that's not, you know. But the other thing is, Judd, do they even have the money to do that? You know,
not now.
You don't think they have the money to make the splash. And so, I mean, if you roll back out there with, you know, Bradbury's your center and Jesse Davis or Wyatt Davis or whoever, Oli Udoh was your right guard, I don't think you really accomplished anything.
Right. And then I'll fall back on how are you trying to, so you can't tell me that. So you're telling me that O'Connell's coaching is just going to bring Kirk up against pressure from the interior. I guess I have a hard time buying that.
Again, it goes back to putting a ton of pressure on O'Connell
and
his staff to fix flaws that sabotaged a lot of the games last year. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you look at their offense and finish 11th, 12th in scoring. But how many did they lead the league in 3 and outs? And part of that was because of the pressures they gave up and sacks or Dalvin getting stuffed at the line and 2nd and 10. I mean, it's just, you know, it was so hot or cold with that offense. It's like you see the big plays, but then that offense and their weaknesses there in the interior would prevent it from being a great offense. And right now, that it needs to be a great offense for this team to be a legitimate playoff team.
Oh, it has to be top 10 in scoring, if not top 5.
And it should. Well, top 10 it should. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt it should. But so no, it's I tell you, this was a curveball I didn't see coming. When that day, you go back to the day they fired Spielman and Zimmer, and I think we all said, whoa, this is you waiting to see how transformational this is going to be. We're not even going to recognize this team next year. It's the same team.
Right. Yeah, no, it's incredible. And somebody clearly, between the Wilfs deciding it themselves and being convinced, somebody clearly said the problem was coaching, which then, of course, goes back to the question of why the hell did you extend those two after 2019 when your last memory of that season was being blown out physically, being blown off the ball by San Francisco. Like, there's just a lot of questions that I would love to ask and get answered truthfully about the thought process of how this thing is being run.
How much do you think of it, Judd, is for the Wilfs, they become so focused on the year to year versus the long term.
Well,
That every year it's like they just see right here. They just see this season, right? And what do we do to be good this season versus let's take a step back here. Let's look at 2027 and how do we get to become great, like consistently, like a legitimate there. And it's all about, gosh, we're fans. We want to win. We want to be competitive. We definitely don't want to be a 3-win team. And so every year it's like plugging holes with veterans just to stay relevant or competitive and not like a broad view.
I think that's a big part of it. I also think part of the problem is, and this goes back to Rick, was they really, I don't think it's a stretch to say, and I think we both thought this, Chip, they really relied on Rick to be their football guy. Like, I think Rick was their football voice, their football friend,
100%.
and they're football fans. And so they decided to blow Rick out, and clearly whoever was advising them or has been outside of their football people who thought they knew, and there is nothing more dangerous than a person that thinks they know the sport, but is basically telling the people who own the team what they want to hear. I think they have basically said, oh, look at our roster. This was all Mike's fault. And like, this is when you made those changes, what you should have said was, we need to go to school on how to get this thing on the right path. And instead they said, they were clearly told, oh, the right path is Rick's gone, Mike's gone, we're fine now. And that's what we're seeing.
Well, and the interesting thing about that is they basically have 2 years for this to work, right? Because that's all you have Cousins under contract for, and it's
right.
So it's basically a 2-year window to fulfill whatever it is they're trying to fulfill, right? And then you're going to have to start over at that position, which means you're basically starting over in your new era or new phase.
And so, okay, so you just hit on, among the problems that they're not accounting for, you just hit on an absolutely key one. For as much as people said, well, if they're bad in 22, Jefferson's going to want out. If Jefferson doesn't sign a mega extension next May and lets this thing ride, and this does not work, he's going to leave, because he's going to say, why would I stay here when you're now hitting the reset button after your short-term fix didn't work? So you are banking, if Jefferson says, I am going to, and this is risky in football, so he might not, but if he says, you know what, I'm going to gamble on myself, I'm not going to get hurt, he would be hitting the market as the Vikings are hitting what we thought would be the reset that they hit right now. Like, these are all the problems of not thinking this through from a business standpoint and trying to think it through as fans.
Yeah, I mean, for him, you would have to really be convinced. Let's not forget that his good friend, just played in the Super Bowl.
Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow.
Yeah, 2 good friends. And so
this guy.
he would have to be convinced that whatever their next step is at that position has the potential to not only be a winner, but obviously have a great connection with him and put up kind of numbers. So that dialogue has to start like the day they got hired, not like 2 years from now, like, well, that didn't work, we're starting over. I mean, you can't be that. You have to be telling him, like, hey, this is what we're doing. Either him or his agent, and they have to be figuring out who, the quarterbacks next year. And that's the thing, Judge. Like,
and he's not dumb though.
That is the thing, Judge. Like, the Wilfs do not want to bottom out, and nobody wants to bottom out. But how do you get the Joe Burrow? How do you get that guy by saying we're going to knock on the playoff door, we're going to get anything happens, and then if you don't, you're stuck in the middle.
And the other thing too, I like this goes down so many roads that aren't being explored. Kevin O'Connell has almost no choice but to turn Kirk Cousins into a Super Bowl contending quarterback.
Has to. That's
But I
what
mean,
they're
think
banking
about
on. Yeah.
think about that statement. Think about what you just said. The ridiculous amount of pressure that we just put on a first-time coach, because knowingly or not, the people who write Kevin O'Connell's paychecks are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no, well, I sort of fixed Kirk a little bit. No, those two need to have a Super Bowl contending team, or else this becomes, at least round one, an unmitigated failure.
And the thing is like they are banking and betting on that we haven't seen Cousins' ceiling, that there's something else out there, another level or two that he can get into.
Because Zimmer,
Zimmer, offense coordinator, system, whatever, that we just haven't seen his ceiling yet. Man, Judd, that's a risky proposition. That is a risky proposition. You know what? Again, I'll keep saying this. Maybe they're going to be proven true. But if they don't, you've gone down a path where people are going to say, you should have done this. We told you this. This was not the way to go. You know,
Correct.
You're going to open yourself up to some major second guessing.
Correct. And keep in mind too. So the Kirk stands will at every turn make excuses, but keep in mind, okay, Mike and Kirk didn't work. It's a lot of people's fault. It's Kirk's fault. It's Mike's fault. It's the team's fault. But Kirk Cousins had a long run in Washington with a litany of big name offensive up and coming coaches. And I know that people will say, but look at his team there. But the reality is it didn't work there. Yeah. So with it, so now you're saying, well, this time around with O'Connell, it's going to work. And you're basically saying you're invested 100% in it working. So it's a very interesting, I in some ways, I can't wait to see it, because if it works, great. If it doesn't, how do you come out of that and say, okay, that didn't work, but now, so you're always going to be shifting things.
Yeah. I mean, people will, the blind backers will always say, well, I didn't have the offensive line,
right,
whatever, but if it doesn't work in this case, it's not going to work. Right. I mean, because you've given him the offensive guy, you removed the boogeyman who hates offense. You removed some of these things. And so you can't, there'll be no more. This is it. This is it. We're going to find out how much more, we're going to find out the degree to which Mike Zimmer held back that offense. Mm-hmm. And Mike Zimmer and his coordinator wrote revolving door. And if they can do it and fix the defense, then, I still don't know that this is a team you're going to say, well, there's a team that's a legitimate Super Bowl team. But it should be a playoff team, or at least in that discussion, and relevant in December.
I think it needs to be. I think it needs to be a playoff team. And if it is a playoff team, Chip Scoggins, and Vikings fans celebrate that, they're happy. They head to the bars. They head to their local liquor store. How would you suggest what type of beer would you suggest they celebrate with?
I would pull up Barstool. I would look down the long line of taps.
Yep.
And I'd point to the red one. Give me a Surly Furious, buddy.
That's exactly right. You know what? I'll sit right by you. Give us two. And if you don't have Surly on tap, what's wrong with you?
That's right.
Best IPA around.
We're out of here. We're going to another bar.
Exactly right. Because Surly and all of the great products from our friends Surly Brewing help present Purple Access, Purple Daily, and all of our Vikings programming. And we appreciate that. Yeah. So it's going to be, I thought that Mark Wilf in lots of ways doubled down.
100% double down.
And I'm with you. Yeah. But I'm with you. He believes that. So I'm just really curious. I'm really now, because the day he said super competitive, I'm like, well, of course he's going to say that, because you're not going to say, well, I hope we lose a bunch of games. But I think him elaborating on it in the past week now really shows that there is a genuine belief that they have been told there's no reason why this group of players can't win. And again, I'll come back to what I keep saying. In some ways, I sort of feel for O'Connell, because he's a first timer, gets his big break, and basically is being thrown directly into the fire and told, oh, but by the way, no real room for failure here. So you need to win and prove that Mike screwed the whole thing up, which, hey, look, Mike didn't have a couple of good years before that. Pretty damn good coach. So we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. And I want to see, I'm curious for OTAs and mini camps to start to,
So am I. Yeah.
To, not only to see the coaches and all this stuff, but to see this personnel on defense, Judd. I mean, I still, so you have one starting corner now in Pat Peterson.
You got your nickel corner.
You got your nickel corner, and I guess Cam Dantzler.
Dantzler's Dantzler right
now. Unless you
draft
a guy at 12 and you feel like he's willing to, you can plug him in there. But it's going to be a fascinating. I know off-season work can kind of be boring and all that, but when you have a new coach and new staff, to me, there's a lot of intrigue there.
100%. All right, Chip Scoggins, talk to you next week. Appreciate it. And enjoy the Final Four here at Target Center with.
Definitely will. See you, brother.
Talk to you later. Bye.